Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. Air ticket prices are going up and will likely remain so in the next few days. With Go First going to NCLT, the aviation sector is reeling under reduced capacity and as a result, rise in airfare. Now, flight ticket prices have increased by as much as 50% on certain travel routes. This has come as a surprise to many. Why? Because the market share of Go First that went under was just 7.8%. Why are then ticket prices up more than 50%? We hope to find out during the course of our show. Remember, bogged down by acute financial crisis, Go First halted its operation and went to NCLT for insolvency resolution. Now, Go First was operating 200 flights a day on some of the most busiest routes in the country and was among the top 5 airlines in India, just behind Indigo and Tata Group-backed airline Air India Vistara. On the show, what's driving airfare and future of aviation sector with limited players. Joining us at this point in time is Amit Singh, who's an aviation expert. With me is my colleague Soumalya Shantikari. Before we discuss as to what's happening in the aviation sector, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to News9. Soumalya, coming to you first. This is a constant pressure point for people who take to flights, people who want or are ambitious about taking flights from point A to point B. Air ticket prices have in fact significantly surged in the past couple of days.
Yeah, and this was expected, Shweta. I mean, with the unfortunate grounding of Go First airline, with limited number of players in the sector now present, and no matter how much bullish the projections are made for the sector, limited airlines means obviously limited choices for customers, limited routes, and if people have to go out or make plans, obviously, and if there's a cancellation or the airline goes bust, obviously the ticket fares on those routes go up, and that is what we are seeing at this moment. And with the peak travel season coming ahead and people have their plans lined up on last moment changes, obviously will result in their budgets going haywire.
Okay. Captain Amit Singh is also joining us at this point in time. So I want to, begin by asking the most important question that perhaps is going through everybody's mind, and that is, we understand that Go First is with NCLT at the moment. They are, of course, hoping that the petition will be heard sooner rather than later. But they were just holding about 7.8% of the market share, whereas we're seeing a surge of as much as 50% in the airfare. Now, one of my colleagues who happened to book a flight to Kashmir had to pay 10,000 prior to Go First going under, now had to pay about 18,000, which is approximately 60 to 75% rise. How do you justify and what are the reasons for these price hikes? Because they seem too high by every standard.
Yeah, so we need to understand how the prices are, or rather deconstruct the prices. These fares, what we were seeing earlier, were highly or deep discounted fares. These are now the realistic fares. If you calculate the cost of fuel, which is almost 50%, the cost of the ticket, then you have parking charges, navigation, passenger service fees, security. So all these, if you take the real cost, it will be much higher than what is prevalent. So what is done is that an airline breaks down the fares into about, say, 13 buckets, they say, from the lowest, the minimum fare, to the maximum fare. So, for example, on a Delhi-Bombay sector, the minimum fare could be 2,500, maximum could be 30,000. So it depends on the revenue management software because the airline wants a particular yield for a flight. So initially, if the flights are going empty or the seats are empty, the software will automatically bring the prices down so that more people book. As the booking keeps going high and they realize that the yield is coming closer, they started to increase the price of the tickets. But as I told you, there are 13 buckets. So the highest bucket would be on sectors like Ladakh, Srinagar, and Dharamshala, Port Blair. These are places where there is a very high demand and people are willing to pay. So that is why the airlines are cashing in. Airlines will not cash in on a sector where the numbers are more. So here the flights are less, so they want to make the maximum yield out of it. Go Air had the maximum flights on Ladakh, Srinagar and Port Blair. So that were their high bucket flights, wherein they would charge the maximum. So are the other airlines doing so. So it is not a surprise that prices on these sectors are high and going higher because Go Air has pulled out of these sectors. On a Delhi-Bombay sector, it will not make much of a difference because Go contributed much less to that sector.
Okay.
So that
but the
is
Delhi-Bombay is
deconstruction of the price.
also a route that has seen some sort of surge in prices.
Yeah, but not as much as these sectors like Leh, Srinagar and Port Blair.
Okay.
Because you have alternates available. Where there are alternates available, you cannot go beyond a certain limit. But places like Dharamshala, where only 2 airlines fly, they can charge anything. The top bracket or the highest bucket they can charge to get maximum, because they know that tourist season is coming. The holiday season will start May, June, and people are willing to pay whatever price, the highest bucket. So they will like to make, or rather cover up their losses from the previous season, wherein they were giving deep discounted fares. So that is why if you purchase in advance, the prices will not be as high, but on certain sectors, they will still remain high.
Okay. You know, this actually brings us to a larger question, that is, government wants to make sure that more and more people are taking to flights. We want to have more smaller towns, tier 2, tier 3 cities connected with flights, and we have now full-fledged airports in many of these cities under Udan scheme as well. How does this fall in line with the vision of having more people take to airs if the flight tickets are going to be this high?
Well, the first thing is we need to have a roadmap, a new roadmap for, or rather a vision, what we can follow or construct. The Udan scheme has limited the fare prices to 2,500. So an operator might not be, it may not be viable for an operator to continue operating. That's why we have seen in the past that airlines start on Udan scheme and then shut down later. So these are all loss making. The state and the center have to compensate the airlines for the losses. But we see that Indigo is the largest airline. It is a low cost. Go Air called itself ultra low cost. Or even if you say low cost, SpiceJet is a low cost. So we have more of low cost airlines in India, but the infrastructure does not meet the low cost requirements. The infrastructure is for a full service carrier. The terminals we have, we don't have dedicated low cost terminals wherein the overheads are less for these airlines, or dedicated airports like we have abroad. So if we don't want to fly from Heathrow where the taxes are the highest, we go to a smaller airport around London wherein the taxes are lower and the ticket prices are less. So in India, the government mandates a lot of things. Like, for example, a person who is deputed for security of an aircraft will not do any other duty besides security, which is not the case elsewhere. Elsewhere, they're doing multiple roles. While they are not required for security, they will do something else. So that is how you keep your fares low. The government or the ministry does not have control over fuel. So there is very little that the ministry can control in terms of prices. But if we have a vision for a low-cost, separate low-cost terminals in India, that will ultimately bring down the prices. There was a move sometime back to import fuel directly. They had a kind of almost went through with it when Kingfisher was there. Airport Authority, along with Indian Oil and certain airlines, would have a special purpose vehicle, and that would import fuel directly. So the taxes would be eliminated. So that didn't go through. So that was one of the ways of reducing taxes. So you have to have innovative thinking. Government can come in with a policy, but how will they implement? Because they have to go to the finance ministry. Will the finance ministry listen to them or not? That is not, we haven't seen in the past that action items being performed, the critical action items. Everybody's been crying over fuel. Even the ministry says fuel, but nobody's able to achieve it at the end of it. So a true low-cost airline is a need. We have hybrid low-cost airlines. So we work somewhere in between, wherein the overheads are highest. That's why the ticket prices are much higher.
Okay. Are you therefore suggesting that the targets that have been set out are perhaps unrealistic? We don't have the infrastructure that is needed to accommodate low-cost airlines. Government is not able to control prices of ATF. Are you therefore suggesting that we're not there yet when it comes to aviation dreams that we have built in the last couple of years?
Right. So we are moving in an ad hoc manner, which means if we have a terminal, we'll build a smaller terminal, extend that terminal. Not like China is rebuilding the entire terminal instead of these ad hoc increments. So they are rebuilding the whole infrastructure to meet the requirements. So we have seen in the past, we have a small runway, we extend it by a few thousand. Then we see, oh no, we need a bigger aircraft because that is a popular destination. Then we add a few more thousand feet. Calicut is a typical example, wherein the initial length of the runway was 6,000, it was increased to 8,000. And still we have so many issues with the infrastructure of the tabletop, safety issues. So we don't build a new runway, that is the requirement. So for that we need a vision, a long-term roadmap. So neither do we have a roadmap, nor we have that vision to build infrastructure. Aviation needs to be institutionalized, wherein the people have to be developed. Their thinking has to be developed in a way. So it is not that you can send people for courses abroad. So they can come back and develop something, but it has to be done with a cultural view. Like the airports we have in India, they're just metal and glass. So that does not reflect the cultural identity of India.
Okay.
So an airport is a gateway where people arrive and they should get an essence or feel of what India is. But at Indian airports, except for Bombay, wherein you get to see some artwork and a bit of culture, Delhi is a total disaster. It is just glass and metal.
Okay.
So how do you want to build?
Let me get in my colleague
cultural-
Soumalya here. Very, very strong words coming in there from Amit. And one key takeaway is that we have a missing roadmap. I would like to slightly disagree. I think we do have a vision. What we don't perhaps have is the implementation of it. And our empty tier 2, tier 3 airports are going to tell you a tale of a grand vision not meeting expectations because nothing was actually practically possible, especially in this case where we have a limited few airlines operating a more, sort of a duopoly at this point, if I may say so. One more low-cost airline there, so 3 big players, and literally eating away the competition that we have. And that does not present a lot of options for people like us or in general, who have dreams and aspirations of taking to air.
Yeah, Mr. Amit Singh rightly pointed out that there are too many bottlenecks that are preventing the aviation sector from taking off. Obviously, there are airports in place, but as he said, that it doesn't really show the aestheticity of the cultural identity of the country, and obviously some of them, the small town tier airports, they haven't been able to entice operators, or if I may say, the government or the policymakers haven't been able to put in measures.
Absolutely, and many flights had to be closed down because there were not enough
because
takers.
A lot of state governments reneged on promises. I know, for an example, in Bengal, where the operator was promised some subsidies, but it wasn't given, and that airport had to be shut for a few months. So in this case, you have to ensure that the promises are being kept, and in order to ensure and entice more flyers, you need to give them the roadmap or the ticket so that the footfalls or the passengers take on a daily basis. But how do you ensure that? For example, there's a parliamentary panel meeting that is currently underway.
I want to come to you, and I also want to go to Amit, but let me first come to you. One of the big reasons why people are not taking flights is, let's admit it, it's easier to take a train, take a bus, or even take a roadway bus to the said destination if you're traveling within the state, even interstate, and there is better connectivity there, less money to pay.
Right.
And as far as time is concerned, somebody would rather give away more time than give away more money, or part ways with more money. And in this case, fares becoming expensive day after the day is not helping at all. What is government doing about it?
Yeah, the government has to step in at some point of time, because obviously if I have to book a ticket to Mumbai or Delhi or to Ladakh, or for that matter, if I'm not going there for a holiday, then my budget goes for a toss, because at this point it is completely out of my reach, or for any person seeking to go with his family or for an urgent trip. In that case, the entire situation of having a flight or booking a ticket in an emergency situation, that the current situation really shows that it is out of hands of the common man, because he has to pay through his nose. In this case, the government and the regulator has to step in, because they go first had a summer schedule, and obviously now it is not in a position to operate
Meet
those
its
flights. So what do you do
absolutely.
about those planned tickets or those planned vacations that were supposed to take place? Here the common man is left high and dry.
Absolutely. Common man left high and dry. And in fact, Shomal, we're given to understand a meeting is currently underway. All regulators, the Ministry of Civil Aviation is meeting with authorities to decide and discuss if there should be a capping on price.
Yeah, with the Manipur situation on the boil, and obviously flight tickets from that region also shooting through the roof, the government realizes that it is time they need to rein in on these prices, because obviously it's a dire situation over there. And not only Manipur, obviously you see Delhi Mumbai flights going over 15,000, which means it's a matter of concern, and the social media is uproar and a buzz with how they are having paid, have to pay through their noses to get a common ticket on a domestic airways, forget about international tickets.
Absolutely.
So you can imagine if someone has to book a ticket right now, how he is going to do that if he has limited funds in place.
Okay. And this is interesting because it's easier for me today to travel abroad, Amit, as opposed to travel within the country, because the ticket prices are way higher if I were to go to Mumbai as opposed to if I were to go to a neighboring country down south, one of these island nations. So it basically tells you a tale of a country that is very, very ambitious but hasn't been able to meet consumer expectations of the audience, and that essentially is cheaper tickets. What can government do at this point in time? We understand a meeting is underway to decide to cap pricing, but how much of it is possible?
So that is the easiest way to cap prices, but for a businessman, the business has to be viable. The businessman has to make the ends meet. By capping the prices, you're putting the businessman in a corner. Why should they keep taking losses because your policies or you don't have a roadmap? So, like I said, if Delhi can have 2 low-cost terminals on the west or the east, so instead of catching a train, people can walk to the airport within 10-15 minutes, board an aircraft and fly off. That would be more comfortable and viable than waiting in queues for 2 hours and then for a 1-hour flight to Chandigarh. So that doesn't make sense. So the government has to do some rethinking on all these aspects. Yes, we can have mega plans of making India the hub of aviation, buying wide body aircraft, but within India, you have to develop a different infrastructure for hub and spokes. So smaller airports can feed the bigger airports, but we should have that infrastructure of smaller airports near the big cities also, because maximum population is concentrated around the cities. So Delhi needs about 2 or 3 smaller airports, north, east or west. Similarly, other places like Bombay needs another one. So that kind of a roadmap needs to be built. Infrastructure is required. They're building or reopening airports, but you cannot just blindly reopen airports and then shut down, because that needs a lot of investment. Like in the Northeast, a lot of airports have been opened. I'll give an example of how that collaborative decision making is not happening. We spent millions in launching satellites to make the Indian navigation system. So we launched those satellites, built that navigation system, then we approached the operators that we have this, and we issued a card from this year onward, you will start using. Okay. But the operators still haven't started using. They said, you never consulted us. Because we'll have to get our aircrafts refitted with those, the transmitters, the receivers and all. So that will cost a lot, rewiring and all. So that the satellite system is lying idle. It's a waste, millions of dollars up in the sky. So the Gagan hasn't taken off as yet to the full capacity. Whereas it would have been better if everybody was taken together. So that is why, if we are building airports, then we have to look or ask people that what is your requirement, and then start building infrastructure for the long term, rather than coming from the top that yes, we have opened 100 airports. That is good to make headlines, but not for business. Okay. Similarly for alternate fuels and all, so that there is a technology, but the current technology is very expensive. the alternate biofuel. So that also needs to be looked at. Ultimately, it is electric or hydrogen. So what are we doing in that aspect? At least the ground support systems, the vehicles running on ground, they can be converted to biodiesel or alternate fuels.
Okay.
That can be made mandatory. That doesn't need much investment.
All
But
right.
running aircrafts and all, making them, that is a long-term vision, but it is an ad hoc or an interim step. Ultimately, it has to be hydrogen or electric. So that kind of vision or roadmap is not there. Yes, people are thinking, but we have to put it down on paper and then start building it.
All right. I want to talk about an imminent problem, an imminent issue, which is Go First going under. Lots of flights have been cancelled. As of today, flights still stand cancelled. We understand that passengers who had already booked these flights are not going to get their money back. They're going to get some form of voucher. What looks like to me is that aviation sector is shrinking by the day. We have worries about SpiceJet also going to NCLT now. What is your view on aviation sector as a whole? Because we've been talking to experts and everybody seems bullish. In fact, we have had experts saying that consolidation in aviation sector is perhaps a good thing. Do you agree with that point of view?
Well, consolidation also leads to price control. So wherein if you have duopoly or ultimately if Air India and Indigo are going to survive, then they will be fixing the prices. Of course, the competition commission will be there, but then ticket prices would be higher than normal. So we need that Akasa, we need another airline. So more competition is better, but there are always signals which come up before an airline. So Rome wasn't built in a day and wasn't destroyed in a day. Spice, we have seen the performance of Spice. If we talk about Go First, in 2020, they had about 30% of the fleet grounded. Then 21, slightly less, 29, then it increased 33%. So when we see 30% of the fleet grounded, we should be concerned that something is going to come up. How are they meeting their requirements, financial requirements? DGC has a car which clearly says, after Kingfisher folded up, that if we see non-payment of salaries or deferring of salaries or aircraft being taken back by the leasing agencies, it is a cause of concern and a safety issue also. So DGC has to step in, but DGC never stepped in. So the writing was on the wall, but nobody did anything. So it is basically on the policymaker and the regulator. The buck stops there, because they were aware of what was happening, the financial situation. And ultimately, we don't have an SOP for such a thing. If an airline closes down, there has to be some fund which is should be blocked with the government, so that the people are refunded or something. There is no SOP. Every time when Kingfisher shut down, we faced a situation. Jet Airways, SpiceJet cancels for whatever reason, and then Go Air. So there is no SOP that when such a thing happens, we will implement the SOP and provide refund to the passengers. So why should passengers take the brunt of it? Airlines was closing the operations on May 3rd or something. They would have known in advance, so would have the ministry. It is not that the airline is keeping something as a secret. So everybody was aware, but there is no
But it did come as a surprise, in fact, even to DGCA, which
but they had filed. There was an arbitration going on.
That is correct.
In Singapore, and they had a favorable verdict.
That is correct.
But
they blamed Pratt and Whitney squarely for not meeting the terms and conditions of the arbitration that came in their favor.
And the arbitration only provided them 10 engines.
That
10
is
engines
correct.
would be sufficient for 5 aircraft. If they get 5 aircraft back out of 28 aircraft, that still doesn't meet their requirement. 5 is hardly anything. And 6 aircraft were taken by the leasing agency. So that was the arbitration. If somebody reads that arbitration, it is very clear that 10 engines will not suffice or pull the airline out of the misery. So it has to end up in a situation like this. So they should start implement the SOP immediately, so that passengers do not get inconvenienced.
And passengers did get inconvenienced.
Yeah, even for
from
evacuations.
What we know, absolutely.
We have seen evacuation from Sudan and other places for COVID. We have been doing at least we have done 15 evacuations since independence, but everything has been an individual's effort. So still we do not have an SOP for an evacuation, that if there is a need for an evacuation, then the airlines will provide this. So everybody tries to contribute, and we try to have a person who takes the credit of it or whatever.
Okay.
But
Do you know,
there is no SOP.
I'm running short on time, Amit, so I'm just going to come to you with my last question, and that is Pratt and Whitney. We understand Go First has squarely blamed Pratt and Whitney for not meeting expectations, for not living up to the terms and conditions or what they signed, and when they signed up with with Go First and this agreement that had been arrived. So my question therefore to you is, because Pratt and Whitney is also used actively by Indigo and other low-cost carriers in this country, can we expect more trouble in the future? Or do you think Pratt and Whitney, because it treats every customer differently, and with Indigo they have a bigger fleet, there is going to be different terms and conditions, and perhaps that's never going to come up as a problem? Or do you see this problem continuing if Pratt and Whitney does not meet expectations?
Pratt and Whitney does have a problem. It was there from the beginning, and it was a big safety issue which was brushed under the carpet for obvious operation reasons. But we should take the example of Indigo. At some point of time, they decided to switch the engine manufacturer. They switched to CFM engines and decided not to go ahead with Pratt and Whitney. So they did a smart move. Why didn't Go ahead do the same thing? Their contracts perhaps were not built like that. So when you make contracts, you have to have those clauses wherein if the manufacturer defaults or something, then you have a liability clause, or exit clause, so where you can exit and purchase alternate engines. CFM engines do not have any issues. So Indigo did that. They played safe, took the wise decision, and not persisted with Pratt and Whitney. Pratt and Whitney has a problem worldwide, and they will continue to have for a long time, which was increased because of COVID and supply chain issues. So they are trying to do it, but it will take time.
Okay, it will take time. Not very positive, Amit, regarding the future of aviation sector, Shomalo, as opposed to what many of our other experts we have spoken to in the course of last couple of weeks, who've been very bullish on what aviation sector has to offer in this country.
Yeah, obviously, these are route disruptions, there's no doubt about it, and according to me, I think a country like India, it needs at least 2 full service carriers and at least minimum 3 vibrant and robust low service carriers, because in a country like India, where you have a scheme like Udan, where you want the Aam Aadmi to take the flight, you cannot have a situation where a normal flight ticket is about 50% the price that you used to have. So in this scenario, the bottlenecks that Amit was speaking about and the roadmap that he said is lacking there, somewhere down the line the execution is being left. I mean, that is somewhere we need to work up on.
Need to work harder on the execution.
And obviously the regulators, we cannot have situations like this time and again, be it Kingfisher, be it Jet, and now with Go First, where the consumer is left high and dry, and he has to worry about his refund process. And at the end of the day, if someone has to travel, he needs to travel by airline in a quick space.
That is correct.
But in what do you do when the airline is not up and running? You have limited choices and you have to pay through your noses. That's what we've been seeing happening, and unfortunately this time around we don't seem to have learned lessons from our past incidents.
Okay, I hope we learn our lessons soon. As a customer, I'm more worried about paying through the nose, more worried about taking a flight that's going to cost me way more than what it used to a couple of weeks ago, in fact. Amit, Shomalo, thanks very much for joining with details on that very, very important story. We're going to move on now. If you own a diesel vehicle, you have a problem, and there's something that you need to be worried about. A government panel has recommended that all diesel four-wheelers should be banned by 2027 in larger cities, in cities that have large number of populations in India. The proposal could have a significant impact if it's accepted, not just on the car makers such as Tata, Mahindra and Mahindra, but also on owners, on us. The Energy Transition Advisory Committee, headed by former Petroleum Secretary Tarun Kapoor, has recommended that city transport should be a mix of metro trains and electric buses by 2023, in addition to suggesting that by 2027 we should phase out diesel four-wheeler vehicles. Now, if accepted, the recommendations will dramatically hasten what has so far been a gradual move towards cleaner fuels. The panel's recommendation come on the back of government's aim to reduce greenhouse gas emission and to produce 40% of its electricity from renewable sources as a part of its 2070 net zero goal. On the show today, the impact of such an advisory committee recommendation if implemented, and how will consumers be impacted along with car makers? Joining us at this point in time is Amar Jatin of Federation of Automobile Dealers Association. Sir, thank you for taking time out to be with us. Before I come to you with a question, I want to tell our viewers, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to News9. This is an important story because this affects not just car makers but also us individuals. I want to understand from you the larger fine prints of what the panel said. Does this mean that every person who owns a diesel vehicle should be worried about parting ways with their vehicle as of 2027?
No, I don't think that is what the panel has said. So I think that if you already own a vehicle today, there is nothing in the advisory that says that you need to sell it off before that. But of course, it also would mean that they are suggesting that the diesel vehicles are something that should not be encouraged, at least in the cities which have over the 1 million population. So there are, maybe the fine print still needs to come out, but the questions will remain that what would happen if you're traveling between cities or between states? Would you still be allowed entry? What would happen to, like you rightly said, your existing vehicle? So those details are still to come out. But after 2027, as per the panel, the diesel vehicles should not be sold is their suggestion at this moment.
Okay. And what sort of impact is that going to have on all the car makers who are still selling diesel vehicles, including, as I mentioned, Mahindra and Mahindra, Tata, part of offerings from Kia are also diesel vehicles. What sort of impact is going to have on all these car makers? What is their inventory with diesel vehicles, if you can give us some ballpark figure, and how many diesel vehicles do they sell annually?
So if we look at actually the transition away from diesel has already started happening some time back. So if we look at a 2015 database, the share of diesel was 49% of the passenger vehicles sold, while recently it has only been sub 20%. So not only is the country moving towards alternatives to diesel, which predominantly till now was petrol, but slowly and slowly, I think even there have been alternative fuels available in terms of CNG, in terms of hybrid. Of course, the EVs are catching up. So I guess that share of diesel in the total sale will keep reducing.
Okay. And any numbers as to how much inventory does Tata, M&M and big key diesel players have at this point in time?
I think we need not be too worried about the inventory currently, because there is still a lot of time till 2027. I think the one good thing is that they have spoken about it 4 years in advance. It gives them OEMs time to plan their strategies too. However, recent times, the inventories have not been very high at manufacturers and at dealer ends. There has been waiting periods for most vehicles. So in my opinion, inventory would not be more than a month across the OEM as well as the dealership.
Okay. Now, the larger question that comes to my mind, therefore, is the fact that there has been a sustained effort to move away from diesel towards petrol and now towards EV vehicles in the last couple of years. There are researches that suggest that diesel is not as polluting as appears to be now. I'm not an economist, so a disclaimer there. But in fact, OEMs and automakers have said it continuously that diesel, as assumed to be polluting, is not the case. There is scientific evidence to say so. Would you agree with that assessment?
No, I would absolutely agree with that assessment. So diesel is got the label of a unclean fuel, but I don't think it is that any longer. Globally also, there has been a lot of advancement in technology. There are so many, new sensors, monitors, etc. with the car, which ensures a cleaner emission. In India, actually, we are far ahead of that. Not only did we skip the whole BS5 stage, we moved in India from the BS4 to the BS6, looking at the pollution in mind or looking at the emission norms in mind. And even in the BS6 from this April, we are already manufacturing the BS6 Part 2, which is the OBD2 cars. So which is itself is a large step ahead. So a diesel vehicle today is certainly not the diesel vehicle you think of when someone says diesel, which has, you know, a trail of black gas being emitted from its tailpipe. So it's not the case anymore. But on the flip side, because of the advancement in technology, the car itself has become a lot more expensive. So the manufacturers have spent a lot of money on diesel upgradation of their technology, making those investments. Of course, they will pass the costs to the consumer. So that makes a diesel car today actually quite expensive. And for that reason, like economist wise, if you're saying it has made a few manufacturers actually stop offering diesel to the market. So they offer today only a petrol variant, and those who are relying heavily on diesel now have rejected their portfolio to be competitive in the other segments too. But from a OEM point of view, I think an policy which is clear a long time before they make their investments would be appreciated, and that would help them plan their future too.
Okay. Now, this is obviously just an advisory. We don't know whether this is going to be accepted or not. We'll have to wait and watch out for that. But interesting recommendation also coming in there as far as city transport is concerned, which should be now a mix of metro and electric buses. What sort of impact will that have on the existing fleet of city transport that we have on metro cities such as Delhi?
So if you look at already, there has been movement to electrification of the buses, or, you know, the intercity movement certainly is becoming more and more electric and hybrid or CNG in certain parts of the state. So I guess shift at that end has to happen first, and the passenger vehicle has to happen later. Of course, with the metro and being launched in a lot of new cities, things will keep on becoming easier there, and we might see lesser vehicles on road, at least for your daily commute.
Okay. Also, you know, as far as a shift towards cleaner fuel is concerned, you know, we discussed this and we've been discussing here on News9 as to faster adoption of electric vehicles, the missing infrastructure around it, and an increased thrust as far as two-wheelers is concerned and four-wheelers is concerned. With two-wheelers, we have the FAME scheme. We don't know whether that's going to continue beyond March of 2024. With four-wheelers specifically, there are challenges such as, you know, charging stations, there are challenges with, you know, mobility on highways. How do you see India or the car makers in general mitigating those challenges, because a large part of the onus is on the government as well as the car makers to ensure that there is infrastructure around electric vehicles?
Yeah, I think this is certainly the flavor of the season, where EVs are spoken about in the same breath as you mentioned transport. Yes, the two-wheelers have seen a much faster adoption. You've also seen the adoption happening in the commercial vehicles of point-to-point transport at least. Long distance still remains a challenge, and I think it will continue to remain a challenge for some time. We have to accept that a change is going to happen to some sort of alternative fuel. Is EV that, or is it hydrogen, or is it something else? We don't know. But I think if we look maybe a decade down the line, there has to be some sort of change that is going to happen in the existing fuel that the car is powered by. So which way the course will take? Of course, you're right. The FAME subsidy has helped in the passenger vehicles and the two-wheelers because those are the two segments that it is applicable on. But in the larger commercial vehicles or LCV category, it is not applicable. So it's not making that much of a difference. But what happens when that subsidy reduces, or what is the subsidy the reason of the growth of that segment, are those questions, I think, which only time will tell.
Okay. Of course, those are questions that time will tell, and the government will also have to reveal to us at large. You know, my final question to you before I let you go, obviously there is a lot of thrust around EV, as you rightly mentioned, it's the flavor of the season, but there are other cleaner fuels as well, and a lot of car makers, and I would like to remind at this point in time, especially Mr. Bhargava of the Maruti, has been hinting at other cleaner fuels apart from EV, and suggesting that even electric vehicles, for that matter, will require electricity and therefore resources that will be utilized. What are the other possible suggestions that you can give to our viewers at this point in time? CNG, of course, being very sought after, but EV is not where the buck stops, is it? There are other options as well.
Absolutely, there are. And like you mentioned, Mr. Bhargav's statement, similarly, all the Japanese manufacturers, in my opinion, currently are looking at alternatives to EV as being more future oriented. You don't see too many EVs from these manufacturers present in worldwide and in the country today. So maybe they know something, or they've been working on something that we aren't too aware of. There certainly will be alternatives to EV, and in my personal opinion also, EV is maybe shifting the pollution from one place to another.
That is correct.
Maybe more localized at where it is mined or where it is generated, but it's not solving the problem. So I think there needs to be a much more robust solution to this problem of emission that comes in.
That is correct, because this is and I want to thrust on this, focus on this a little bit more, because there's often a feeling here that EV is the answer to all our problems, but that may not be the case.
Yeah. No, absolutely not. I don't think so. It will have to be, there will be, like I mentioned, some sort of replacement to the existing fuels. Which one is it? Which one will get, more acceptance, more adaptability, more ease of transmission, more availability at customers' convenience? We'll have to wait and watch for that.
Of course. Amar, thanks very much for joining with your key inputs on that very important story.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Shifting focus to Dalal Street now. All right, there's a disclaimer there for you. Viewers are advised to take the expert advices here and research on their own before adhering to every tip that you get on our show. It was a volatile session for the Dalal Street. After trading in the green for majority of the session, benchmark indices paired gains to close on a flattish note. At close, Sensex was down 2.92 points to end at 61,761 level, while Nifty rose 0.01% to finish at 18,265. Suyash joining us at this point in time. Suyash.
Yes, Shweta, so it was a volatile session for the D Street, and after a 1% rally today, we saw some selling pressure in the market today, as investors or traders, we should say, decided to book some profit because of some important data points that are coming over the next week. So now US is set to release its inflation data for the month of April, which will set the tone for the FOMC's upcoming meet. Now some analysts are worried that the inflation will continue to persist in the US, and as a result, the Fed will remain stricter for a longer period. However, foreign institutional investors have returned, and they are preventing any sort of a steep correction in the market. So the overall market, as you mentioned, ended on a flattish note. The broader market also ended on a flattish note. Nifty mid cap was up about 0.04%, and the small cap index ended with a marginal loss of 0.05%. Nifty IT stocks, as we know, which have been under pressure since the muted earnings or Q4 earnings of TCS and Infosys, they were the top gainers today. They rose about 0.73%. Nifty Auto was another one. It was up about 0.47%, and Nifty Pharma gained about 0.42%. On the other side, Nifty PSU banks, they lost the most. It fell about 2.75%. Nifty Realty, Nifty Bank, and Nifty FMCG also ended the day in the red.
Okay. Mankind Pharma made its debut on the bourses today. What was the listing like?
So yes, Mankind had a stellar debut in the market today. It got listed at a price of about 1,300, which was a premium of about 20% over the upper band of its IPO price of about 1,080 rupees. Now the stock continued to rally throughout the session, and it surged as much as 32% in intraday trade. It touched an intraday high of about 1,430 rupees, and it finally closed at 1,422, which was up 31.69%. Now the bumper listing of Mankind's IPO was not completely unexpected, because the IPO itself received an overwhelming response from the market, as it was oversubscribed by about 15.32 times.
Okay.
the primarily driving force behind the strong interest were qualified institutional buyers.
That is correct, because retail participation was muted.
Yes, Shweta. So retail participation or the retail book was the only category which was undersubscribed when it comes to Mankind Pharma. It was about 8% lower than the entire quota set aside for them. And we also need to understand that the retail participation has been muted for, almost since the market has been consolidating since 2022 and over the last 15 months or so. And to add to that, the participation on the retail sentiment is generally cautious or pessimistic during this time, because retail investors are generally more risk averse compared to institutions. So they may wait for a market, favorable market conditions to return or some signs of market recovery, as we are seeing. Actually, the green shoots of recovery are there from the macroeconomic numbers. So they are waiting for some solid indicators to pop up to get back into the market.
What could these solid indicators be?
So good macro numbers, strong earnings. So if you remember, actually, back in 2020, after the initial COVID crash, the market was rallying, and every IPO, regardless of their financials, regardless of whatever the name was, all the IPOs or all the listing were seeing great responses, and retail investors themselves were at the forefront of it. They were lapping up all the stock. So generally what happens is, during a market rally or a bull run, the participation or the investor sentiment is optimistic. They are more optimistic about the market, so they tend to participate more in upcoming equity issues. Whereas during bearish times, they are not too confident about what will transpire in the market, so they tend to generally sit on the sidelines.
Okay. What other stocks made headlines today?
So Shweta, India Bulls real estate plunged about 20% today after the company announced that the merger of Naam Estates Private Limited and Embassy One into the company has been withheld by the Chandigarh bench of NCLT. Okay. Another one was UPL. The share closed about 3% lower today after many brokerages cut its earnings target after the firm posted a 43% year-on-year fall in consolidating profit. Now they posted a consolidated profit, about 792 crores, which was much lower than street's expectations of about a 1718 crore profit. Canara Bank,
almost less than half.
Yes, almost less than half. Canara Bank was another one which was under pressure today, and the stock dropped about 3%, but this was despite of a good Q4 earnings. Now the lender reported a profit of about 175 crore, which was a 90% higher compared to last year, while the net interest income grew about 23% on a quarter-on-quarter basis.
All right. Suyash, my colleague there, with numbers and good news and bad news from Dalal Street. Suyash, thanks very much for joining with those details on that very, very important update from the stock market. Shifting focus now, ending the show with a heartwarming story. Zerodha co-founder and CEO Nitin Kamath shared this picture on social media. It's with his father-in-law, Shivaji Patil, who started a grocery store in Belgaum after retiring from army, where he lost his fingers to frostbite. It's a story of resilience and contentment, important lessons that the 70-year-old taught Nitin. In a long Twitter thread, Kamath shared, and I quote, his father-in-law goes to the local market regularly on his decades-old scooter for the specially abled to buy groceries for the shop. Kamath, who is himself a billionaire, says that his father-in-law refuses to stop working even with his and his wife's success. Sharing this example, Nitin, who has been talking about a longer lifespan and living a good life for a while, said that there is no doubt that the answer to be content is here, like his father-in-law, and never stop being active mentally or physically. And no money can buy that.
Do more pull-ups. You are the
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of Business Plus. Keep watching News9.